If Cooperstown is baseball's Hall of Fame, then the Friars Club is the Hall of Fame for Jewish comedians. Armed with my flip cam, you're about to get an exclusive tour inside this New York shrine.
Hi, my name is Barry Doherty. I'm the historian of the legendary Friars Club and home to many famous Jewish comedians. And let me sort of open the door and take you on in. How's that?
Most of the comedians I've met here have been Jewish.
It was owned by a businessman. His name was Martin Erdmann. He built it to his own specifications. As you can see in our foyer, he had Italian marble imported, he had wood imported. Everything was done specifically to his taste. And he lived here until he died in 1937, at which point the Manhattan Project moved into here, the Institute of Physics. So there were a lot of more bombs than just bad jokes that have happened here, basically, is what this boils down to. This is the Billy Crystal Bar. We just named the room after him a few years ago. And this was sort of a seating room and when it was a house, and I'm not sure how much of a bar he had at the time here then, but we certainly make full use of it now. The Friars moved in 1957, and we've been here ever since, and we've just been making history.
You know, to be in the dining room in that era, which is gone, you have, you know, on a given day you could have George Burns and Milton Berle and Henny Youngman, and they're all sitting at different tables in the dining room, but yet they're all talking to each other and shooting jokes back. And to be just sitting in the dining room and not even part of their group, it was just fascinating.
I'm on camera!
Come over here. I forget you are an Irish guy.
What Jewish comedians do you remember? All of them.
All of you kidding?
Who's the funniest one? Hands down.
Now are you gonna guess me? Who's the funniest one?
Who's the best tipper?
Then who made you?
Oh, forget about those guys. Oh, they didn't know what it was mean tip.
So this is the George Burns room, and this room has different portraits of people who have been roasted throughout the years. We roasted Billy Crystal, and Rob Reiner was his roast master. Then we roasted Rob Reiner when it was on Comedy Central, and one of the things that Richard Belzer did was he made Rob get up and read a review from his movie North. So Rob got up and he's reading his own work, saying, you know, this was the worst movie I've ever seen. And as Rob finished this scathing article, he just looked up and said, you know, if you read between the lines, it's not that bad. So they rise to the occasion, and they really are good sports about it. Pretty much Milton Berle was the roast master of the century. So Willis said, you know, I'm not going to do this unless he does it. And at the time, you know, Milton wasn't that young. He hadn't done a roast in a while, but he said, sure, what the hell. So he got up, and it was just one of the funniest roasts. And he came out again to do it when we roasted Steven Seagal. And for me, what's kind of special about that roast is it was the last roast that Milton Berle and Henny Youngman both did. So it's kind of a special part in Friar's history. A few years ago, the board decided that they need to name a room after a woman. And as Joy Behar said, it's a good thing they finally got into the 15th century. So they decided to come up with Lucille Ball, who's one of their favorite friars, and it was sort of a no-brainer to name it after her. She had been roasted in 1961, and Johnny Carson was the roast master. And he basically got up and he said to everybody, look, we're now here, we're roasting a woman. Guys, I want you to just be very cool about it. We have a lady here, don't be disrespectful. And then he introduced her as Lucille Testicle. So, this room, it was the dining room when it was a home. And now it's the Friars Bar. And we have the bar itself it's the Joey Lewis Bar. The room used to be Joey Lewis, and now he just got the bar. But women in the Friars have an interesting history. You know, they weren't allowed to be part of the Friars Club until 1988, and that's when pretty much the law in the Supreme Court said you all have to let women into all private clubs. But it doesn't mean that they didn't honor women before that. Obviously, Lucille Ball. Phyllis Diller in 1983 was dying to know what went on in these roasts, because at that point they were still stag. So when they were roasting Sid Caesar, she dressed up as a man. She got the wig, mustache, wore a suit. She looked like Claude Rains. And she snuck in, and she said it was the filthiest thing she'd ever seen, but it was also the funniest. Her biggest problem was she didn't know what bathroom to use, so she had a big problem with that. And afterwards, she was busted, and to get even, they roasted her 2 years later. So they always get their man, so to speak. So this is the William B. Williams billiard room, and we actually have a new table here. But the table we had right before this, Jackie Gleason practiced for his role of Minnesota Fats in The Hustler, which was really cool to be able to tell this to people on a tour, and then we got a new table. So now I have to go to the home of the Friar that now has that table and tell the real story.
And who is that Friar?
Well, I won't name names, but it's in a very good place, and he's got his certificate of authenticity.
So as we exit this New York institution, here's a couple of Friar facts for you to chew on. There have been 65 official Friars roasts. Now, Sam Levinson was the first comedian roasted in 1950, but the actual first roast was Frenchman Maurice Chevalier back in 1949. Singer Sophie Tucker was the first female roasted in 1953. Who's made the most trips to the dais? Of course, Uncle Milty. 4 times he's been roasted. Jerry Lewis and Chevy Chase are the only other repeat roasties. So why would anybody want to put up with the abuse of a roast?
We only roast the ones we love. That's our motto.